Travis Chappell for joining us. Thank you guys, Travis. You guys give him a round of applause. And Travis, just so you know, we have a room full of people here in the office and also on Zoom. And in the room, they can hear you. We can communicate back and forth. So you're good to go on that.
Garrett, is that Mark Chappell's brother?
It might be Mark Chappell's son. And that might be why we used the connection. We pulled the favor to get him in to be able to do that.
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me, everybody. Appreciate you for taking the time on a Thursday morning to join me and learn a little bit about podcasting. So I obviously can't see the audience, but I can hear a lot of you talking. So if you are currently creating content online, whether that be through a podcast, YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, then just give me like a say I or say me or say I do that. Okay, cool. All right, so a good amount of you are doing something. Say it again if you actually have a podcast.
Aye.
Okay, so one. So it's super interesting to me all the time how, as real estate agents especially, and for those of you who don't know, yes, my dad is Mark Chappell, and he's been a top agent in the Antelope Valley for the past 20 years, and I grew up in that household, and so real estate agents and the real estate industry has always been near and dear to my heart. I was walking properties and doing caravans and open houses every weekend from the time that I was 4 years old, it seems like. And so in this field specifically, there's oversaturation of people, especially when the market is really good, like it has been here really for the last multiple years now. It's continuing to go up and up and up, and the market, it's a good time to be a real estate agent, and there's a lot of people that jump into the space. And it was interesting when I asked a bunch of people to say if you're creating content online, including Facebook, Instagram, and social media. And almost, it sounded like a chorus of people, and I'd be willing to bet that 80-90% of people would say that they've been putting something out there, whether it be on Facebook or social, whatever platform that you enjoy the most. But then when I switched over to podcasts, there was only one person that said when we switched over to the podcast. And in real estate specifically, all you have to do is differentiate yourself. You have to be able to brand yourself and differentiate yourself from all of the other people out there that are doing the same thing that you do. I was having this conversation with somebody at Mastermind that I'm in, and they were using realtors as an example, and just how every single person that I know, we all know 8 or 9 different realtors. And so if there's nothing that differentiates you from the person sitting next to you, then you got to kind of look and figure out, hey, how can I start to differentiate myself as much as I can? And I think one of the best ways to do that is to start creating content through using something like a podcast. So I'm just going to take a few minutes. I don't know how much time I have, but I won't take up too much of you guys' time. I know you have a lot of things to do and a lot of activities to do, and I like doing more Q&A style, so I want to open up for a little bit of Q&A at the end here. So I won't take up too much of your time, but I do want to just go into 3 quick reasons why I think you should start a podcast in 2021. Three reasons why I think you should start a podcast. Number 1 is credibility. It's credibility. So this is the foundation for me. We teach something in a lot of our online courses and coaching and communities and things like that. We call it the credibility first method, and is the exact method that I used back when I started my podcast. Because when I started a show, I was just a door-to-door sales guy. I, at the time, was just doing door-to-door water purification sales. I was pretty good at it, and I was doing fairly well for myself as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, pulling 6 figures, knocking on doors, selling deals, but when I looked into my future, I looked at it like, man, I don't want to be doing this thing forever. I don't want to be knocking on doors when I'm in my 30, 40, 50, 60s, all the way through. And I knew that I had friends in that industry who were at those age brackets, and they were continuing to do it. And by the way, I have a lot of friends who make a lot of money doing that, and I throw no shade at that at all. It's just for me personally, I didn't want to be doing it. And so when I started looking into this podcasting thing, or how to make money online where I could travel and still be making money while I'm abroad and things like that, I really struggled with it at first, and understandably, because I didn't have any credibility in that space. And so I started creating content around this topic of networking. My show is called Build Your Network, and it was very much like an investigative journalist type of a show, meaning that I did not position myself as the expert, because I genuinely was not the expert. All I wanted to do was learn how to build my own network, because I always knew, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Your network is your net worth. The people that you're around ultimately create the person that you're going to be in a few years from now. So if you've never taken the time to look around you and look at the people who are forming you on a daily basis and helping you level up, if you haven't audited that circle recently, that's something that I would encourage you to do, but that's just a side point. I looked around at my circle and realized that I desperately needed to get around people who were just doing things way, way, way bigger and better than I was doing them. But the problem was I didn't know how to get around those people. And so I used the podcast as kind of my own investigative journey to figure out how to go get in front of people that I wanted to associate myself with. And then it ended up being really ironic, because the thing that I was using to learn also became my #1 tool through which to connect with these people that I wasn't able to connect with before. And so once you start being able to connect with people who already have a name in the space that you're in, okay? When I say this, people kind of get this idea that you have to go interview The Rock or something like that. Like, I'm not talking about A-list celebrities in that context. I'm just saying, like, if you start interviewing people through a podcast, it gives you credibility in whatever space that you're in if you go talk to the top level of those people. So if somebody watching this right now is a real estate coach, right? If you're a Keller Williams coach, and your job is to help agents be a top producer, then it would make sense for you to go interview the top real estate coaches out there. Probably would make sense for you to go get around Tom Ferry. Probably would make sense for you to connect with the higher ups at Keller Williams, to go to a Gary Keller event and hang out with Jay Papasan and get really involved in the culture, to continue to bolster your name next to a bunch of other people that other people already know, like, and trust. Because if you can associate with people that other people already know, like, and trust, then you can control the frame through which those people see you. Does that make sense? I mean, if that makes sense.
Aye.
All right, cool. So the credibility piece is the foundation on which we build everything. And by the way, we've helped real estate investors raise millions of dollars through podcasting. We've helped consultants make hundreds of thousands of dollars through podcasting. Like, the things that I'm teaching are not just ideas that I've had. I did them for myself, and then we've helped dozens of clients in a multitude of different industries do these exact same things. And real estate's one of the biggest ones, because just most people won't bite this one off. Most people will not attempt to start a podcast, and that, again, that's what gives you the differentiating factor. I don't know if you guys know who Brian Casella is, but he's a friend of mine who does real estate down in LA area somewhere, and he attributes a lot of his success to the fact that he started a YouTube channel. And when he started, was it big? No, but it still gives him a little bit more authority, still gives him a little bit more credibility. And in real estate, that's all you are. You're not a salesperson, you're an advisor. And you have to make sure that your client sees you as that way, right? Like, you don't want that person to see you as a salesperson. Why? Because nobody wants to get sold. Everybody wants to buy, but nobody wants to be sold, right? So you need to create enough credibility and authority in who you are and your knowledge base around the topics and the advice that you're trying to give, to where that person sees you as an advisor, and they're only following what you have to say because they trust that you know what you're doing and what you're talking about. And so creating content using something like a podcast, interviewing top people in your space, interviewing local authority in your area, like people who in your area those people would recognize, where your ideal clients would recognize who you're trying to talk to on your show. And by the way, if I went around the room right now, I'm not going to, but if I went around the room and I asked every single one of you to give me an exact profile description of your ideal client, I bet that we would be surprised how few of you could actually do it. And I don't mean that as like a slight against you. All I'm saying is that the majority of time we get taught that, like, oh, we want to go get everybody, we want everybody. But the problem is, when you're talking to everybody, who are you really talking to? Nobody.
Right.
Right? Because there's too much noise. When you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. Pick a client, pick an ideal client profile that you want to talk to, that you want to target. Is it single moms? Is it local business owners? Who do you specialize in helping with their real estate needs? It's going to be a lot easier for you to create content for that person than it's going to be to create content for any person that lives in the entire Antelope Valley, if that makes sense. And so once you have an idea of who you're talking to, then you can craft your content through a podcast to help you earn more know, like, trust, credibility, and authority in the mind of that person. And everybody else you don't really care about, because if you can get that person and all the other people that look like that person to use you as an agent, then that's going to set you up for success in the area that you're in. So it gives you influence, gives you attention, separates you as an expert, and ultimately brings you the credibility and the authority that you want inside of your business that will differentiate you from you and the other person that works at Century 21 that's trying to get business from the client that you're pitching. So number one is credibility. Number two is lead gen. So most people think of a podcast in terms of, well, man, I don't want to do a podcast because I'm gonna have to go get a ton of listeners, and I don't have the time to worry about or focus on listeners, and it's not gonna make me that much money. I sell a real estate deal, I make $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a pop. But if I get sponsors on a podcast, I'm gonna make what, $2,000 a month? That doesn't sound like it's worth my time. And traditionally, you would be correct, except for the fact that most people don't think about the guest-facing opportunities to do lead generation and business development on a podcast. So with some of the real estate folks that I've worked with, I literally tell them, like, look, don't even worry about downloads. Like, don't worry about listens, don't worry about downloads, don't worry about any of that. All you have to worry about is allowing this to be the thing that gets your foot in the door. Right, so Keller Williams does a fantastic job of training you on how to pitch and present and close clients, right? Like that's the reason you guys are here right now on a Thursday. This is like kind of lunch and learn time over there where you get some great education and trainings around those things. So the real metric for you as an agent then becomes, how many people can I talk to? Like, how many times can I get my foot in the door with somebody? Because as soon as I get my foot in the door, I know I can close. I know I can build a relationship. I know that I can drill these scripts that I've been working on for the past couple of months. I know that I can do these things, so all I need to do is get my foot in the door. The problem is that most of you are using antiquated methods through which to get your foot in the door. Whereas if you use a podcast, it's crazy how many people will just let you right in. You don't have to try to compete for it. You're not calling somebody and asking them for a listing presentation. You're calling somebody and asking them to be a guest on your podcast. And that is a much, much easier ask. And by the way, I'm speaking from personal experience here, because when I first started my show, I reached out to a couple what we would call influencers in the business space that I had been following for a while, and I wanted to get them on my show. And I went in for a really low ask. I was like, can I just get 3 minutes of your time? I just want to ask you a quick question on a phone call sometime. It was like 4 or 5 years ago. And they said no. They were like, no, I don't have the time to do that. Other people pay me, $30,000, $35,000 a year to have access to my cell phone for conversations like that. It wouldn't be fair to them. And I was like, hey, that's totally understandable. And but because I'm a little bit of a persistent dude, I mentioned something about my podcast when I replied to their rejection of my 3-minute phone call ask. And to my utter surprise, they volunteered to come on the podcast at that point. So they turned me down for a 3-minute phone call, but they said yes and asked me, like I didn't even ask them, I just mentioned it. They asked me, oh, well, I'm down to come on the podcast. So they said no to a 3-minute phone call that nobody knew, that nobody had to know actually took place. And they said yes to a 35-minute, 45-minute conversation interview, one-on-one, basically free mentorship session that I could record and distribute to an audience of listeners. And they said yes to that. And that was a really big aha moment for me, because I started to realize, man, this is kind of like the Trojan horse that gets me in the door of a lot of places that typically wouldn't let me in, because they know I'm pitching something, I'm selling something, right? So, and if all of your competition is doing the pitch and doing the sell, then if you come in with something that's a little bit more under the radar, then you have a lot higher chance of getting your foot in the door. Now, the problem that some people run into here is that they treat this like a sales activity, and I tell people, don't treat it like a sales activity, it's a business development activity. If you want to start monetizing your guest list, then start interviewing as many people as you can, and don't treat it like a sales opportunity, meaning that I'm not gonna go pitch, just looking at this screen here, I'm not gonna go pitch Leslie and say, Leslie, will you come on my show? I want to make you look awesome, my audience. I appreciate what you're doing in the world. There's a lot of cool things that we can talk about. And then she comes on my show, and then all it is me pitching her the whole time to use my services. That's a bad look, right? That's not consistent with the brand that you want to create. And that's not how you build relationships. Your only goal with the business development piece is not necessarily to sell every guest that you bring on your show. It's to make yourself top of mind in the mind of as many people in your area that fit your ideal client profile that you possibly can. So that the next time, in 2 months from now, when they're looking to sell their house, their immediate first thought is like, oh yeah, I talked to so-and-so on that podcast, I should reach out to them. Or their friend mentions like, oh, I'm gonna sell my house. Oh yeah, I just talked to so-and-so on a podcast, you should go talk to them. Like they feel almost indebted to you because you highlighted them to an audience of people that you've been able to create and leverage. Like this is a ultimate relationship building business development tool that allows you to really essentially generate leads for your business by just talking to people around town that match your ideal client profile and having a conversation with them about whatever it is. Like I don't care, like talk about local eats, talk about the brewery downtown, talk about sports, like you don't even have to talk about business. You can talk about real estate, you can talk about business. You know, if your ideal client's a local business owner, then maybe you talk about how to do business in the Antelope Valley, and that's kind of what your podcast is about, and then that's how you kind of focus on those things. But I'm saying like the main idea is to allow yourself to interview as many people that fit your ideal client profile as possible, so that you can be top of mind for those people when they're going to make a buying decision. Okay. So number one is credibility. Number two is lead gen. And number three, to me, hands down, the best thing about podcasting has been my network. I ironically was teaching networking on my podcast, but it wasn't, again, because I was the expert. I was just interviewing people. So I didn't do any solo shows, like no solo content on my podcast for like almost 2 years, I want to say. It was 3 interviews every single week. All I was doing was trying to find successful people and ask them about their habits around networking so that I could, first of all, learn for myself, but I figured, hey, if I'm curious about it, there's probably a bunch of other people that are curious about this, that are trying to work through the same issues. And then through that, once I figured out that, hey, people are actually willing to say yes to a podcast interview before they're willing to say yes to a lot of other different ways of meeting, then I started to build a real plan to reach out to people that had made a huge impact in my life and continue to associate up when it came to my branding online, which is now, led into all the different businesses and things that I've been able to be a part of. And that wouldn't have happened if I weren't able to get in front of Grant Cardone or Jay Papazan or John Maxwell or Jack Canfield or Matt Barnes or Molly Bloom or any of the other literally hundreds of people that I've been able to interview at this point. None of that would have been able to happen if I didn't have the podcast. My network has absolutely exploded. Like people ask me all the time, I've probably been interviewed now on like over 300 shows myself and a few different media outlets and things like that. And one of the questions that I get is, like, Travis, you're the networking guy, so give us your top tip for networking or whatever. And besides the philosophical things like be a giver, learn how to add value and things like that, the number one practical tip that I give to every single person I talk to as much as I can is build your platform. Whether it's a podcast, a YouTube channel, a virtual event, a meetup, like you need to own a quote unquote stage, a platform, something that you are in charge of that allows you to be able to connect with people that normally would not be willing to connect with you because there's something in it for them. There's an asset that's in it for them. There's an audience, there's a stage, there's a listener, there's a viewer, there's something in it for them to be able to connect with you, and it's a way for you to have a little bit of a value exchange to bring them in front of those people and actually cultivate a connection with those people. And then it's up to you to follow up and build those relationships appropriately from there moving forward. One of the things that we do for that is now we're putting on quarterly dinners with a lot of people that have been guests on my show in the past. I put on I take on all the expenses for it. We do catered food and open bar and the whole thing, and we bring in a bunch of people who've been on my show in the past. I don't ask for anything. All I'm doing is putting a bunch of really cool people together in a room. But that activity by itself has led to a lot of money entering my bank account through other ways that I wouldn't have guessed leading into those conversations. So now I've been able to cultivate or to create a network and then continue to cultivate and follow up on those relationships over the course of time. And ultimately, that's going to be the number one driver of anybody's business that's watching this right now, is the hands you shake. It's the people that you're able to build relationships with. It's the differentiation in the marketplace. And a podcast allows you to do all of those things extremely, extremely well. So I appreciate you guys for having me today. Like I said, I wanted to leave a little bit of time here for some Q&A, and hopefully that was good and helpful enough for you. But we'll go ahead and turn it back over to you guys.
Awesome. I'm sure we're gonna have lots of questions in the room. In Zoom, if you guys have a question, just go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you could jump in. If you're in the room, so we don't all start shouting, just maybe raise your hand or ask something, and that way we'll take advantage of Travis's time here. Anyone have some questions they want to jump into? Go ahead.
Hey, Travis, my question is, what is the third reason that you mentioned to start a podcast?
Network.
The network?
Your network.
Okay, the network, okay.
Yep, your network.
Thank you.
Travis, when you're doing an interview, how do you come up with the questions that you're gonna be asking?
Yeah, so when I first got started, because I had no idea when I first got started, I just literally wrote out a bunch of questions. I spent a long time, I tell all my clients to go through and write 50 questions, a 50-question exercise. And the reason it's 50 and not 25 is that the first 25 are probably the same questions that everybody else came up with. The whole like, hey, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur or whatever. The same kind of, blanket suite of questions that everybody else asks. And so I didn't want to ask all the same questions, I wanted to be different. So I came up with 50 questions and I basically scrapped the first 25 and stuck with the last 25 because I had to dig deep and really think about some good questions. But ultimately, what my real answer to this question is, like, prepare, write some questions out, yes, and think about ways to phrase those questions. But the big thing is to prepare for each individual interview. If you can do enough research on that person ahead of time and then formulate questions that are things that pique curiosity to you during the research process, then they're probably going to make for a much better conversation when you get into it.
Andrew asked on Zoom about setting up the podcast and starting. I mean, the tech side is foreign for a lot of people.
Sure.
Maybe some advice where to go on that, or?
Yeah, so I mean, my best piece of advice here is that literally none of you should be worried about how to start the podcast in terms of like the technology and editing and producing and stuff like that. You should just pay somebody to do it because it's relatively affordable. Like less than $500 a month for somebody else to come in and edit all of your shows, put together the intro, the outro, upload to a media host, distribute to the top platforms, write the show notes, like update the website. Somebody can do that for less than $500 a month. I outsourced it from day one, but it's as simple as getting some sort of a USB microphone. You do not need a microphone like this when you first get started. I used a $60 USB mic for the first 3 years of my show. I just upgraded this setup like a year and a half ago. And it worked totally fine. So as long as you have something that's a little bit better than the audio quality that's just gonna be from your phone or your laptop, then that's fine. There's a really good one called the Audio Technica ATR2 2100 is the name of the microphone. ATR2 2100. I think it's like $99 on Amazon. But that plugs directly into your computer and you can use that microphone. There's no need to go spend a bunch of money on mixers and expensive microphones. That microphone will do just fine. And then for an editor, you can use whatever. If you're on PC, you can download a free program called Audacity, totally free, to edit the podcast. Or if you're on Mac, Mac's already come preloaded with a program called GarageBand, and you can do it for free on GarageBand. So in terms of like cost and technology, it's really not that much. But everybody here, like everybody watching this, should be focused on one thing, and that's selling real estate, because that's the highest leverage point of your time. These things that I'm telling you, like editing your own show, producing your own show, and uploading it to iTunes or whatever, that's less than, like when I say less than minimum wage task, I mean that, because the majority of these agencies have people working overseas that are working for $3 an hour and are happy to do it, and they're actual audio engineers that know what they're doing. So you can outsource it for less than minimum wage, and you shouldn't be spending your time on it. You should be spending your time on more sales calls and following up on leads and setting more appointments, because that's going to make you way more money spending your time doing that.
And just to jump on that, guys, too, if you don't know or do know, Indu Media has set up a podcasting renting booth at their new facility. So you could actually rent time to do a podcast. They have it set up with mics and everything. They record, give you the audio and everything done. It's another leverage point, because they got the idea when me and Adam were doing the Real Talk podcast. We were going to locations and they had the idea of a lot of people are interested in that. So that is another leverage piece that's local right down the street that you could go rent the booth basically and do a podcast from there. Just throwing that out there. And they're just going live with that, I think, next week. So
nice. Yeah, the main piece of advice there is content matters more than everything else. If you're like, man, that sounds fun, I think I can do that, this would be a really good idea, but I don't know how to do the tech. Just please promise me you will not let the tech get in your way. Like, worst case scenario, go to anchor.fm, upload, like record podcast directly into your mobile phone and upload the podcast to Anchor and title it. Like, it's gonna not be good, right? The quality is not gonna be that great, but I promise you the content matters more than anything else. So don't worry too much about the tech or the gear or the equipment. You can always upgrade it later. You can always get better later. focus on the content and getting in front of more people that are gonna be your ideal clients. Because ultimately, you guys are in real estate. It's not your job to podcast, it's your job to sell real estate. And this is gonna be a tool that will help you be able to do that a little bit more effectively.
Can you say that website again? A couple people are asking for that website again.
Oh yeah, anchor.fm.
Anchor.fm.
ANCHOR.fm, yeah.
Now, are podcasts accessible? Once you create the podcast, can it be accessed from any platform?
Any platform. So with YouTube and Vimeo and all these other video platforms, you have to take your piece of video content, your MP4 file, right, and you have to upload it to each individual platform, like Instagram, TV,
Right.
and TikTok and everything else. With podcasting, you go to one place, which is your media host, which is going to be an Anchor, like I said, or Megaphone, or Captivate. There's no shortage of media hosts out there. In fact, my team is building a new media host right now. There's a bunch of media hosts out there. That's where you upload one time your MP3 file to the media host, and then you get what's called an RSS feed link from your media host. It's literally just a link, and you copy and paste that link into some submission forms on Apple and Google and Spotify and Stitcher and iHeartRadio and all these top directories. You submit it once. Once it's accepted, it will automatically update those feeds across all of the platforms anytime you make a change in your media host. So whenever you upload a new episode, all of the top platforms are going to get that episode and distribute them to the subscribers that you have on those platforms. So it makes it super easy to distribute. But that's what I'm saying is like, if what I just said like sounded like Chinese to you, don't even worry about it and hire somebody to do it because it's super cheap.
Awesome.
What advice do you give on figuring out what type of content you're gonna be providing?
Yeah, it's what type of content is basically figured out by what's your goal with the show. You know, what's your goal with the show? Some people, their goal is like, I need to get clients from this, or it is a complete waste of time. Some people, it's like, look, I'm just trying to build my brand as a real estate agent in my area. You know, we're making some good money right now, so I can afford to put a little bit of more attention and time into the brand building piece, not just the direct marketing pieces. So branding's more of their place. Some people are just like, look, I just want to build my network. So you always start with the goal first and then kind of reverse engineer backwards based on what you're going to talk about, because it's going to be different for everybody. If you need to get clients from it in order to be worth your time, then the goal of your show should be able to talk about a topic or something that would be interesting enough to your ideal clients for you to be able to have an excuse to have a conversation with them and put yourself back in front of them, and for that top of mind awareness. If you're looking to build a brand or you're looking to scale outside of your local area and be known nationwide as a real estate agent because you want to start getting into some coaching or something like that, like that's a different strategy. Does that make sense? So it's always starting with the goal first and then reverse engineer, you know, what do I need to talk about in order to be able to reach the goal that I'm trying to reach with the show.
And other than the questions, how do you keep your show different from everybody else that's doing what you're doing?
Yeah, it's all about the topic or the niche. So like once you figure out what the goal is, figure out how you can talk about something that other people aren't talking about. We talk about something called the blue ocean strategy. And basically what it means, like I like using the term blue ocean rather than using the term niche. Niche to me gives it almost too much of a box to live in. Like you can only be talking to dentists that live in South Florida or whatever. A blue ocean to me is just a space that you can play in that other people are not currently playing in. So by the time I started my show, the whole generic entrepreneurship show had been played out. A bunch of people had already done really well with that, and that's what we call the red ocean, right? It's the analogy of a shark. Once the first bite of a kill is taken from a shark, the ocean around that was all blue up until that point. First bite's taken, it starts to get a little bit more red. And once that first bite's taken, that red starts to seep out a little bit, and all the nearby sharks smell blood, and they come over to start feeding on that same kill. And so it's kind of the same thing in this goes for business in general, not just real estate, but if somebody takes a bite of something, meaning that like somebody figured out a new way to generate revenue and make money, then that's when you have all these copycats that come over to the kill because they smell blood, they smell money, they smell that there's a way to grow this over here. And so when I started my show, I looked for, what's my blue ocean? And that's why I ended up in the networking space, because I was originally going to do a show about sales because I was in door-to-door sales and I did pretty well in door-to-door sales, and I figured, hey, I'll talk about how to sell. So I would go to iTunes and I look it up, and there was like 3,000 freaking podcasts that talked about how to sell better. And me as a 24-year-old door-to-door guy probably wasn't going to be able to take much market share away from Grant Cardone and all these other sales trainers who've been doing it for decades. And so instead of trying to compete with them, and I'm not saying it's impossible, you can do it, it just makes it way more difficult. And why shoot yourself in the foot just to see if you can walk? Why not just like try to pick a different blue ocean that you actually care about and are interested in? So I ran across networking, go to iTunes, search it, and there was nothing out there, man. There's just 0 shows that were focusing purely on how to network and how to grow relationships better. And I was like, man, this seems like a good blue ocean to play in. There's nobody that's attacking anything over here. It's not red, it's totally blue. And that was kind of the space that I decided to play in.
There's another question on Zoom saying, are there places a novelist can go to learn how to start a podcast? Like a good resource?
Yes. There's a lot of places online where you can go learn how to start a show. We have a launch course. I don't know the link off the top of my head. It's like $27 or something. But it's like it's a 30-day podcast launch course, and you can take that. It'll teach you how to go from not having an idea of how to start a podcast to having a podcast within 30 days. But we have that available for $27, but there's a lot of other resources out there.
Is that on your website?
Free ones. No, but I can get you the link for it. I think it's literally at 30daypodcastlaunch.com, but I'd have to ask my team.
Okay, that'd be great I'm sure people would be interested in that. Any other questions from anyone in here that's?
What if your demographic of people that you usually sell to aren't listening to podcasts? Like I sell more to older people that are like retiring and moving out of the state of California, and most of them aren't listening to podcasts.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was kind of alluding to earlier about if you are using this purely as a way to get clients and not as a way to build brand or anything like that, then don't worry about listens. Don't worry about listeners. Worry about how many people can I get a conversation with that I wouldn't have been able to get a conversation with before. Ask yourself, who has lists of my ideal clients? So for you with older people looking to move out of California, maybe that would be financial planners or local insurance agents or estate planners, divorce attorneys. There's a lot of different people that would have lists of your ideal clients. So maybe you don't go connect with your clients on your podcast interviews. Maybe you go connect with people who have the ability to send you a ton of referrals on your podcast interviews. Those types of business relationships are great to cultivate on a podcast because those are the ones where it's like, hey, I know there's a potential way for us to work together, but I'm not just gonna ask you to go to lunch with me because that I'm just gonna pitch you, it's just gonna be awkward. This way it's more like, hey, we're just building a relationship, we're just 2 people that are in business in this area, they're just getting to know each other, and I would love to interview you on my podcast about, business and how to be successful as a salesperson or whatever. But the content there doesn't matter as much to you because, like you said, your people aren't really listening to that. It's just a way for you to cultivate relationships with your top ideal referral partners and get a little bit more business from them.
So you've interviewed quite a few awesome people in your time doing this. Who's been your most profound or your favorite interview that you've done so far?
Yeah, that's a tough one just because, it's like trying to pick your kids,
Oh, that's easy. No.
Yeah, it's easy for some people, probably, yeah. I don't know how to answer that completely, but I will tell you that there's a couple interviews that meant a lot to me, not necessarily were like my favorite or whatever, because it seems like every new interview I get is my favorite. But there were a few that meant something to me because they to me stood for something or helped me knock over a belief system in my mind. And that was, the first one was Grant Cardone because he was one of the first really big names that I interviewed. And for me, I had been listening to his show for a couple of years prior to interviewing him, and he had made an impact on my life in a way. And so I was really wanted to get a hold of him, but when I first started, it was just seemingly impossible. It just seemed so far out of reach to be able to actually connect with them. You just meet him, let alone sit down for an hour and have an in-person conversation in his studio in Miami, which is what ended up happening. So when that interview took place, it was just like a big confirmation of a belief system that, a year ago, I would not have imagined that this would have been possible, and now I'm sitting here and it's happening. So what other things have I been looking at in my life that are seemingly impossible that I can now go after with the same confidence that we've already been able to make this one happen? What's stopping me from going out and making these other things happen? So that was like a really big one. It meant a lot to me in that sense. Same thing with Molly Bloom. I don't know if you guys know who Molly Bloom is. If you haven't seen the movie Molly's Game, I highly recommend it. Jessica Chastain plays Molly, and then Idris Elba plays her lawyer. Kevin Costner plays her dad. It's a really great movie. But I won't go into it. But basically, she ran one of the highest level underground poker games in the world at like age 32, and with no previous experience in that space. And hedge fund managers, A-list celebrities, athletes are all playing in her poker games. Got in trouble with the mob and the U.S. government. It's a crazy story. And as soon as I watched the movie, I was like, I want to interview this girl. But then my immediate limiting belief that came in right after that was, oh, that's impossible. And because at the time, again, I was just starting out. I was like 6 months in on the podcast. I had not interviewed a ton of highly qualified or successful people, and I had zero connection to her and zero know-how or knowledge on how to get a hold of her. But then within about 8 months from the time that I watched the movie, I was sitting on an interview with her, and now I've gotten her booked on different stages and booked on some of my friends' podcasts. And if I text her right now, she'll text me back. She's become a really good friend of mine, and that was one of those things where I was just sitting there like, I don't know how this is going to be possible, and it happened. So I guess those are really my answers when people ask me that question, because it's difficult for me to like pick like, oh, this is my favorite interview, but those are a couple of the ones where it was like, man, this is really cool that something that I used to think was seemingly just not going to happen, and now we just instead of assuming that it was impossible, we assume that it's possible now, and then just ask how could it be possible if it were possible, and then we go after that plan and then adjust if that plan's not working and it actually ends up working out pretty well. And then I would say John Maxwell and Tillman Fertitta were two big ones. Tillman Fertitta is the owner of the Houston Rockets. He's one of the wealthiest independently owned company owners in the world, because he's never sold a piece of his company, and it's worth like $4 billion or something like that. He owns 100% of it, which is extremely rare, obviously, at those types of numbers. And then he bought the Houston Rockets, which was at the time, I think it still might be, the most expensive purchase of a sports team in history, and he just bought it by himself for like cash. And so Tillman Fertitta and John Maxwell, both of them, their teams reached out to me for an interview. So those ones were pretty cool, because I was always so used to constantly chasing and messaging and getting ignored and getting rejected and being persistent and finding a gatekeeper and going around this way. And so it was just such a breath of fresh air to have these amazing, high quality people that I would love to interview actually like reach out to me and say, can we be on your show? So that was those four come to mind when you asked that question.
Awesome. I think you said something profound that my big aha that is, you said it, you changed it from not being, if you thought something was not possible, to if it was possible, how would I do it? Is that correct?
Yeah, if it's possible, what would it take? Is the question I started asking myself a lot, because everybody just assumes something's impossible, but it's like, if somebody else has done it and we can figure out how to do it, it might not be very easy to figure it out, but if you really want the goal that much, you can still figure it out and put the work in to be able to get there. So that became the question that I've asked myself now. Now I ask myself that question really often. It's like, if you assume something's impossible, it's going to be impossible because you believe it's impossible. And what you have in your mind is going to ultimately be true for you. And so, it's just like, look, I think this is impossible, but then if you take a step back and you go, okay, it's impossible, sure. But if it were possible, like assuming that maybe there's a chance, and if it were potentially possible for me to actually accomplish this, how exactly would that work? Like, what would need to take place? What are the steps that I would have to go down in order to be able to make this happen? And then come up with some sort of a plan like that and start working the plan. If it doesn't work, then adjust and find a different way. The bottom line is, like, most of those things are possible. It's just really difficult, and most people won't sit down and figure it out and do the work to get there. But I will say that it gets a lot easier the more times that you do it. Not even like forgetting the fact that it's easier just because like now I have a good network, I have a good podcast, and people want to come on my show, and like there's a lot of mutual value exchange there. Like, leaving all that aside, it makes it more possible just because I believe that it is. Because I used to believe that it wasn't, and now that I've done it over and over again in multiple different contexts, that confidence boost to be able to attack something that I want like that by itself is worth it. It teaches me that things that I used to think were not going to happen have now happened. So what other things do I currently think can't happen that I should go after? Because if I figure that out, probably could figure this out if I just get around the right people and get the right information, the right knowledge, and things to do.
That's the answer
That's
to
great.
everything.
Yeah.
That is literally the answer to everything.
How often do you put out content, Travis?
Well, right now we're putting out 6 episodes a week on the
Wow.
show, but we're scaling back as of
Sunday.
October. So we're scaling back on that. We're coming up on 700 episodes. And so we're rebranding and relaunching the show, and we're gonna be doing about 2 episodes a week at that point.
And I have some people asking, what's the best way to get into your podcast, start watching it? How do we go find it?
Yeah, any podcast app you have, if you're on Apple, Apple Podcast is preloaded onto your phone, you can go there. If you have Android, whatever you listen to, like all the apps that you listen to music on now all have their own podcast section. So like Google has podcasts now, it's Google Podcasts, Spotify has Spotify Podcasts, Amazon has Amazon Podcasts. So any of those other platforms, anywhere where you listen to podcasts, you can find my show. You can just search my name, Travis Chappell, it'll pop up. Or you can search Build Your Network, but it'll be there.
Very cool. Awesome. Any other questions before we let Travis, continue on with his busy day?
Yeah, with the network that you've built now, are you the person that's being interviewed now?
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, I've been blessed now to be on, 250, maybe 300 different shows, including like different media outlets and, NBC and Forbes and just got my first magazine, like physical magazine feature my publicist emailed me about today, so that was pretty cool. But then a lot of shows, like if you guys are familiar with real estate, there's Bigger Pockets podcast that I was a guest on in the space, and best real estate investing ever, and Entrepreneurs on Fire, and Born to Impact, and there's quite a few that I've been able to be interviewed on.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Awesome. Well,
Does he still have a coach? Does he still have like a coach to coach him through whatever, other than the people that he interviews?
Yes. So right now I don't have a formal, like, I pay for your advice coach, but I have several advisors and several kind of, I would say, unofficial mentors. Like I just jumped on a call with a CEO coach, an executive coach who runs a venture fund and sold his real estate brokerage in Beverly Hills for $3.5 billion a couple of years ago. And so we have an open-minded communication, and I send the questions whenever I get the chance. A guy that is doing $100 million a year in his software company has an open-minded communication with him. A guy that has an $800 million supplement company, I have open-minded communication with him. So 100% yes. Like my life is very, very much driven by a bunch of people that are a lot smarter and wiser than I am, and I just get the opportunity and privilege to ask them questions.
awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, we really appreciate your time, Travis. We really do appreciate you coming in with us, and we're gonna thank Mark for giving us our connection and network to that. So thank you so much. We appreciate you, and hopefully we could do this again in the future.
Thanks a lot, guys. This was awesome. Like I said, real estate, especially Keller Williams in the Antelope Valley, will always have a special place in my heart, because that's where I was always. I don't know how many hours I spent at offices like that when I was growing up. So I'm happy to do it, and appreciate you guys for having me, for giving me the time. It's been almost an hour, so thanks so much for sticking around and giving me the attention I need. I know you guys are really, really busy as well. So reach out if I can do anything for you, and I appreciate you guys.
Oh, will do. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh, that was awesome. Wow, that was great. Take those takeaways, right? There's a lot of great takeaways there. That mindset one of believing if it was possible. That's not possible. I'm going to start asking that. Well, if it was possible, how would we do it? That's
Were
awesome.
you the only one that said that you had a podcast?
Yeah. So Adam and I, if you guys remember, we even interviewed Jason had a professional football player that he has coached, and he came in, Darian Thomas from the Dallas Cowboys. We interviewed him here. We've done, I think we did 9 episodes. We did the mayor of Palmdale, we did the state, we just called and asked if they would do it, and they said yes. We did the state assemblyman, we've done,
So what was your podcast called?
it was Real Talk. You guys,
Real Talk.
we did about 8 episodes.
Actually, I kind of remember when you guys had the front office when you first did it.
We did. We didn't know what the heck we were doing, and obviously I wish we would have known Travis was this, because we would have called him and asked him a lot of questions. And doing that is why InView has now set up a podcast video, because they have so many people asking about how do I shoot a podcast, local business owners, because it really is an easy entry barrier where you can create an audience, and it doesn't need to be a massive audience to have massive results. And they're setting up a podcast room. It's nice. I've seen it. It's kind of like if you watch Joe Rogan, where there's a table and chairs set up, where they'll record it and they will give you the podcast information for you. The challenging part, I'll just be honest, was the distribution of we didn't know about the one where it plugs in all of them for you, and so
And you
getting
didn't
it
know how to,
distributed.
I don't know wouldn't know how to find somebody to edit it.
You know
Other
what
than
that-
Clint, I
you know what
wouldn't know
that
who to find, you know, like.
Well, that is Clint's. So they will do that, right? Now they'll edit stuff. The challenge was we tried to do it ourselves. We should not have done that.
So a couple things, like I've done different things with Clint where I've had him do small, short videos.
Uh-huh.
Like from the same thing, I had him lower one down to like a minute, 20 seconds. But having them distribute, like I can post them on Facebook, but I was trying to put them in command. And I couldn't figure out how to download it from,
Has to be MP4, it can be less than 2 minutes. And then you can do an ad through command on there through that content video. They're also doing reels now where you can put on your stories and stuff like that. All that content stuff, I'll be honest, I'm not great at that. That is things I would love to be better at. But they're providing it because the people that are great at it are seeing great results. Tom Paul is really good at it. Tom Paul, I mean, have you guys seen following him on Instagram and other stuff? He's great at it. He's really good at doing that that content. So making that content is a challenge if you don't know what you're doing. So if you don't know what you're doing, you have to leverage like anything else. Your business owners, if you have a spot in your marketing budget to do this and to film and to do something like this, and you have an idea. Another interesting statistic I saw today in our mega camp for leadership, the National Association of Realtors, they showed a ethnic group of population to the amount of real estate agents. And the amount of real estate agents, Hispanic, is 2%, and the population is 16%, right? So there's a huge gap there of an opportunity if you're Hispanic to get into the real estate market. Well, people also need to know that you do real estate, having a platform and doing a podcast or something like that as well. Every culture is undermined in real estate besides if you're white. If you're white, there's more realtors than there is to the population, right? So if you are anything else, maybe that's a part of what you should be doing your podcast as a platform and reaching out to that demographic, right? You don't have to have this massive demographic. You have your niche. I use Jessica, if she's still on here, as an example. Jessica was Rookie of the Year at Keller Williams International. Everyone, right? I was like, what did you do? You must have killed it in LA. She was Army Moms in Roseman. Like, she had her niche and she killed it.
Blue Ocean.
Blue Ocean, exactly. That was her Blue Ocean, and she killed it in that thing. Right now, she's grown way past that. So, what is that niche? What is that demographic? What are you going after? Make it work. And that was, I mean, he had some great points in there. We're out of time. Let me do this real quick. Let's spin the wheel. So I got to give away some money. We got a lot today. Is everyone still on Zoom too? Oh yeah, we still have a bunch of people on Zoom. Okay. All right, we have some people. Lynn is in here, and man, you're the only one that's here. You're the only one that gets to spin the wheel. So come on down and win some money, all right? All right, we've had a lot of $100 winners for whatever reason, and so
Is it weighted there?
yeah, it's weighted. So hopefully, okay, there you go.
Just weighted.
Yeah, there you go. Give it a good one. I jinxed it.
So already guys like,
It's still $1 more.
She's hosting a bar, give her another chance.
I just stopped the wheel here and saw you.
Hey, it's the wheel of destiny, the wheel has spoken, I'm sorry.
that dollar.
You know, that's bad luck. And guys, once again, if you wanna come up and spin the wheel and have some fun, you just need to go ahead and give a referral over. And if you're thinking, I gave you a referral this week, it's for the previous week, I've been getting a lot more of these referrals, I have pink sheets filled out, all of a sudden agents are handing them in like crazy. They have to be an active agent with a license, that's the requirement, and they have to know I'm calling them. You can't just give me a random name you looked up in Gabbar, okay? They gotta know I'm calling them. And then let me know why I'm calling them, if it was a great transaction, and if they're a great agent, you just want me to meet them, whatever I'll do. You come and spin the wheel. Guys, this is silly, it's fun, it gets you to spin it. What's the real gift?
Downline.
Downline, profit share. What's a capper get you on average every year?
About 5 grand.
$2 grand. $5 grand in profit share. It's about $4 grand in profit share, but it goes up to your 7 levels. So if you're the first level, you get about $2 grand of that, right? And if they're a capper, what else happens?
Disappearing cap.
Jackie gets it. Disappearing cap. Quarter of her cap's gone, right? We have a capper joining us from Jackie. They were named as a sponsor. She get to spin the wheel, and she gets a quarter of her cap disappeared, and she's going to get $2,000 a year on average as long as that agent's capping with us. That's a good deal. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's a great deal. All right, guys, thank you so much. Wait, before we go, real quick, because I forgot.
Hey guys, so I got a call from, how many of you guys remember Nancy Del Salto? She used to be one of our agents.
I remember her.
She's at Frontier in Rosemont now. She does new homes. So she gave me a call this morning for all of you buyer agents right now. She has some inventory open up to, and they're giving an incentive all the way to the 30th of this month. There was a couple days. So full 3% co-op, 3% commission. If you submit an offer that gets accepted with them, from now to the 30th, there's an additional $2,500 bonus.
Okay.
An extra $2,500 on top of your 3% co-op. Okay?
And the house is already done?
They're done. Okay? And your buyer gets up to $14,000 in incentives.
Incentives or in like fixed
Cash
rates?
incentive. They can use it towards their closing costs, they can use it towards upgrades. If they have money left over on their closing costs, the money's there. Okay, it's not like where a seller gives you closing costs, and if the closing cost is less than the money they gave you, it goes back to the seller, right? No, here, it's the buyer's money. So, just FYI, take advantage of it. I mean,
It doesn't have to come from their lender then?
it's coming from their builder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you another thing. A couple times I've taken places to different builders, not particularly to that one, but you go in and you sign your client in, but they write the offer. They kind of take your whole client.
That's the whole basis of working with new construction. You don't have to do anything.
You just go in and sign
You
in.
sign your client
So
in,
when
they
you
take
say
over,
write
you
the
get
offer,
picture.
I'm like, wait,
So
what?
anyhow, just quick FYI, there's some money out there to be made with Frontier. Thanks.
You should go show those houses in Roseman. I'll take that. 3%, I don't have to do anything, $2,500 bonus, all in. All right, guys, thank you guys so much. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you guys have other people, network that you know that might be great for us to listen to or do, let me know. I'll bring them in. The safety last week, we got a lot of positive that. I believe Erica came up and said, hey, I got the safety guy. If you know somebody, let me know. We'll bring them in, we'll bring Valley to you guys. Look forward to you guys seeing you next week. As always, have a great day.
Awesome.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you, Garrett.
All right, Garrett, you're welcome. Thank you, Mark. He's not here for his own son.
Garrett, what I wanted to say is that